Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cutting Edge Figure Skating Podcast. My name is Kim Dunaway, and in this episode, I'll be recapping the ice dance event at the 2025 Four Continents Championships. First of all, I gotta say, the tech committee here was pretty tough. Not a single team got better than a level 2 on their pattern step in the rhythm dance. So that made for maybe not just like astronomical scores like we would see typically in some of the championships at this point in the season. Still thought that they scored decently high. The top two teams did. Anyway, just thought I would throw that out there as a little tidbit. This was a very close battle between Gilles and Poirier and Chalk and Bates, and this is exactly what I wanted because we haven't had a showdown at Four Continents with either of these two teams this Olympic cycle. Obviously, Gilles and Poirier weren't here 2 years ago, and Chalk and Bates weren't here last year. So finally, we get what I felt like was a real showdown because I don't feel like at Grand Prix final, obviously, with Piper and Paul's big mistake in rhythm dance, we got to see very much. Grand Prix final the year before that, we had Piper and Paul actually finish third there, so they weren't even really competing against them. It felt like, and then we finally got, a little bit of a glimmer at last year's Worlds. But Maddie and Evan had such a big lead after the rhythm dance was going to be very difficult for Piper and Paul to come back. Even though they won the free dance, they were not able to come back with that kind of a deficit. And I mentioned at the time, they need a really good rhythm dance to help them compete against Maddie and Evan. And when this one debuted, Skate Canada this year, I said, this is it. This is the rhythm dance that can finally get them to compete with Maddie and Evan and hopefully really have this rivalry. I think what we've been wanting this entire Olympic cycle that we really didn't get because when Piper and Paul were doing so fabulous in that first Grand Prix season after the Olympics, Maddie and Evan were a mess trying to figure things out. And by the time they figured things out, then Gilles and Poirier had lost momentum and training time. So finally, I feel like a year out from the Olympics, we are getting this rivalry. And it's really important for Piper and Paul, especially because had they gone into the Olympics next year, having lost to Maddie and Evan over the last 3 years, I think it's a very, very difficult argument for them to win the Olympics without Maddie and Evan making a mistake. So getting a win here is huge for them. Whether that translates to a win at Worlds will be yet to be seen. And I think it makes it a real toss-up, which makes it super exciting. But I think it was so important, whether it was here or at Worlds, for them to get a win over Maddie and Evan so they can be in that conversation next season. And I think with this win here, they're there because Maddie and Evan didn't make a major mistake here. Neither did they. It was very close, exactly the way that you would want it. And I'm excited for what this means for Worlds. And this has been a year of, a lot of chaos in ice dance. Like no competition has really felt like it has gone how we would have predicted it. And I started to feel this little inkling, the last couple of days going in. I think Piper and Paul might win this. I don't think I made any official predictions. I think it was just like what I want to happen is just for it to be close. And it was close. So let's talk about Piper and Paul first. I thought in the rhythm dance, they were just a little faster and a little sharper than Maddie and Evan. Maddie and Evan had just like a little separation on their twizzles. That was really the only thing that you could sort of point to. But I thought overall, Gilles and Poirier did have the edge in the rhythm dance. The free dance, Piper is in a new dress, which I don't like this one either. I didn't like the other one, but I like the other one better than this one. They're both like the same color, so it still kind of washes her out. The other one, I didn't really like the sleeves and the neckline, and this one, I don't like. I don't like it either. It's not important, but it's such a good program. I just want like a costume to match the program. I don't know that I've ever really been like, oh, outside of maybe like their Vincent program, which was perfect. I feel like I don't know if I've ever just like loved any costume that they've had. I know it's a minor nitpick, but their 1 foot turn sequence was the only thing that I just didn't like in this free dance from them. I thought it seemed like it was a little rushed, and they did just end up with a level 1 and a level 2 on that particular element. They ended up getting the edge on both GOE and PCS. PCS was like a hair, like 0.07. It was basically like a dead heat, but they did get the edge, but they got the edge on GOE, which made the difference here with them winning. It was less than a point at the end of the day that ultimately separated this team. With Maddie and Evan, they their free dance was as strong, I feel like, as it's been all season. I felt like they change the exit on that last curve lift from early in the season. I just thought it looked different. I'll have to go back and watch an earlier version. I still don't know why they changed their ending pose. I liked the first one when they were down on their knees so much better. There must have been some issue where they felt like they might fall out of the pose or something, that they went with this like easy nothing burger. But I just like the first one better. It was just like the perfect ending. Their lifts are incredible in this piece. I feel like this was an absolute example of just like you could have tossed up and it could have been gone with either team. I think I ultimately, like I said, I definitely agree with Piper and Paul getting the nod in the rhythm dance, and I think I agree with Maddie and Evan getting the nod in the free dance. Ultimately, Piper and Paul end up on top here. In third place was Marjorie Lajoie and Zach Lagas of Canada. Pretty much what we expected for them to get. Zach was sporting a new 5 o'clock shadow and a new suit. So not the flamboyant ruffles that he had before. Don't know how I feel about the beard growing. It's interesting. Like, the Austin Powers have, like, I've never seen the movie, but I mean, I have seen clips of the movie. I don't think he had facial hair. Not that has, I don't know. But and at some point, they like picked up some ice and threw it up. And I was like, did they do that before? Like, I don't remember that. I don't know. I've said my piece about this rhythm dance all season. Like, they perform it well. The mashup with Earth, Wind, and Fire and Austin Powers just, to me, doesn't work. Like, I much prefer Green and Parsons, Austin Powers. These boots are made for walking. They just seem to match much better. These just feel very different vibes. Earth, Wind, and Fire is funkier, and the Austin Powers is more like disco. It's just, to me, it doesn't quite match. But they performed it well. The free dance, they did have one issue, and Marge stumbled really bad on that second set of Twizzles. It cost them some points, but it did not cost them placement. She was definitely worried, but they had enough of a padding between them and Carrera and Ponomarenko to stay in third place. In fourth place here was Christina Carrera and Anthony Ponomarenko. I thought this rhythm dance was another good performance from them. I do think this is one of the better rhythm dances this season in all of Ice Dance. I don't know that I'm going to have a rhythm dance on my season's best list this year. They have been slim anyway. I think I had one 2 years ago, and last year their rhythm dance that they had made the list, but I'm not sure anybody's rhythm dance is going to make it this year. Piper and Paul would probably get the closest, but I like their free dance better, so that won't make the list likely either. I just say that to give them their flowers, because I do really enjoy their rhythm dance, whereas most teams, I'm so sick of just like this whole era of music. It's insane. Whereas their pieces of music, I don't recall anybody else skating to, and so it just always feels fresher, and they perform it so well. Their free dance, again, good. It just, all season, it hasn't excited me. It still doesn't excite me. I think they do a good job with it. I'm just ready for like a different free dance from them next season. But they did well and continue to score well. Probably not as well as they would like. I think they would like to get in those 120s for sure in the free dance, especially, and get over 80 in their rhythm dance, so they can score over 200 points consistently. In fifth place was Emilia Zingas and Vadim Kolesnik of the US. Their rhythm dance, they actually leveled up. They only had 38 points when they finished their performance, and when their scores came out, they ended up with 41 points. So they were one of the lucky teams that got leveled up and not leveled down. Thought it was a good performance. They've been really strong in the rhythm dance all season. It's the free dance to me that's been kind of a bit up and down. It was another good performance here, not as high as what they scored in their Beauty and the Beast free dance at the same event last season, strangely enough, but that was their best performance of that all season. Whereas I feel like they've had lots of good performances of this, just lots of little small things that have gotten them at different times. In this program, they actually got the dreaded exclamation point on their character step, which means they didn't fulfill all the requirements, which usually with the character steps means one of two things. Either they did not properly go from one axis to the other, or they were too far apart at some point. That cost them probably a point and a half, which was the difference between them probably getting around 115 and that they, would have been a little bit better for them. Now, some teams can score a tremendous amount, like Piper and Paul got extra 4 points on their character step, which is very, very strong. That hold that they do in theirs is probably one of the best. Them and Turculent Versus have the best character steps, in my opinion, in Ice Dance this season. So they score tremendously high on that. Vadim and Malia aren't going to score 4 points on their character step, but they would have gotten more than 1.1, which is what they got with the exclamation point. And that held them back just a little bit. They seem like they're just about always disappointed with their scores. Poor things. But, no major mistakes, good performance. And I think for them was a pretty successful season. I know that they have high expectations and they want to do a little bit better than what they're doing. But I don't have any complaints with what they put out there this year. And I thought both of their programs were strong, especially that free dance. In sixth place was Hana Lim and Ye Kwan of Korea, and they're skating in their home country. Crowd really supported them a lot. They completely changed their rhythm dance. They were doing Adana Summer earlier in the season, which they had already had a costume change from that. But now they've had another costume change. She stitched the wig, which, hilariously and famously fell off during a practice at some point right at the end of one of their run-throughs. So now they're doing James Brown, Etta James, and Sly and the Family Stone. It felt so generic. It just doesn't have the command that it would have if they had been doing it all season. I believe that they debuted it at Korean Nationals. I don't know why they changed it. Was their rhythm dance weaker? Yes. Is this one better? Not in my opinion. And was it so weak that they needed to change it? No, I don't think so. I think they needed to work on the levels. I don't think they needed brand new choreography, but here we are. In their free dance, they changed her hair a little bit. Like she was wearing like a ponytail and just made it look bigger, whereas here she was just kind of in a bun. Still had the silver streak there. I quite like the knee slide that they do in between their first and second set of twizzles. I don't love everybody's choreography in between the twizzles, but I do like Piper and Paul. I've kind of questioned theirs when they did it last season. It doesn't always work for everybody, but I do like theirs here. And that last lift that they do is just fabulous. With her, leg up in the air, and it's incredible. In seventh place was Holly Harris and Jason Chan having another good event at Four Continents. It was a great event for them last year. Got some of the best scores of their career. I feel like the rhythm dance just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. It's not terrible. It's not great. It's just kind of there. Their free dance is so much stronger. This Claire de Lune, I Love You Kung Fu. It's almost like a Shoma tribute music, right? That's what he used in his short program last season. One of their lifts, I felt like, as well as their last spin, was a little bit labored. But other than that, I thought it was a really lovely program. Was Yoshida and Morita of Japan. Their free dance, I thought they were just the absolute class of their group. They skate very early, so they're not in some of these later groups with some of the bigger names, but they're just so much stronger than a couple of Chinese teams that are there, the other Japanese team, and some of these other teams that were there. Their free dance, that 1 foot turn sequence that they do just works so well. And the character, I think the character step that they do just fits the piece really well. Another really beautiful performance of this Romeo and Juliet piece. In ninth place was Alicia Fabry and Paul Ayer of Canada. In their rhythm dance, I thought they were going to have a disaster on the twizzles. They were really, really close together. It made me nervous, but they were fine. So I thought they were in the clear. And then he took a fall in their pattern step while they were in hold. She amazingly did not go down, but they couldn't complete several steps due to the mistake. And that really made them suffer and fell quite a bit in the rhythm dance. They were in 10th after the rhythm dance. They had just a fabulous performance, I thought, in the free dance. I think that was their best performance of this free skate all season. They have unfortunately had just some errors here and there at different competitions, and I don't feel like we've seen them at their best in any of the major events. And while they moved up to ninth after finishing eighth in the free skate, I don't think that this was overall a showcase of how strong they were. I probably would have had them ahead of Lemon Kwan in the free skate. Honestly, I just thought that their performance was really, really good. I really enjoyed it more so than I have at any other point this season. In 10th place was Jian He of China. I really need this team on the JGP next year. Like, they're so good in seniors right now. Can you imagine if they had been on the JGP this season? Please put them on the JGP next season. I mean, unless they're just going to roll them out in a full senior schedule, they're not going to have the opportunities in seniors that they would have in juniors. And I think that they would just do so well there. Their rhythm dance, the fever is just so classy. I just feel like the hit the road jack piece needs to be like funkier, but it was a really good performance and they had a personal best. I thought in the free dance, they were just a little bit more cautious, a little slower, and just looked a little greener. They still managed to finish ahead of their Chinese teammates who won nationals. So it was a big, big win for them over their Chinese teammates overall. But I just really want this team to be in the junior circuit next season. In 11th place was Tanaka and Nishiyama. We saw this team along with Jian He last week at the Asian Games. They had a fluke fall from her after their pattern step, and then in the free dance, she fell out of their sliding movement, which was their last element. So couldn't quite stay on her feet like normal for these two, but they're always super fun to watch. In 12th was Ren and Jing of China, the national champions. And of course, I saw them again in the Asian Games last week as well. And so I've just literally been jamming to like Earth, Wind, and Fire like all week. They were playing it at the gym when I was going in one day last week. And I was just like, oh yeah, oh yeah. And so they found themselves behind their Chinese teammates after the short program. Their free dance, I probably would have had them ahead of Zhao and He, honestly. But I just love the music in this free dance. Like, watch his face sometimes. He is just bringing the drama. He is not just like letting her have all the fun. Really find it super enjoyable. In 13th place was Naruzova and Dadiev of Kazakhstan. Again, another team we saw last week at Asian Games. A little bit more successful last week. In their rhythm dance, I think that their tricks are really good, but the step sequences just really hold them back. The free dance, I really enjoyed. I gushed over it last week, but they had a big issue on her twizzles here in this competition, and that held them back quite a bit from reaching the scores that they got last week at Asian Games. And then the last team here was in 14th place, and that was Harlow Stanley and CG Urano representing Mexico. They are both born in the US. So I'm in my mind, I'm going, okay, so how do you decide that you're going to represent Mexico? I mean, I think it's super cool that Mexico now has a dance team. I feel like it's probably a long road to some kind of citizenship for them, kind of like it is for Caroline Suisse representing Ireland now, but still super cool. And hopefully they will inspire some other competitors who are born in Mexico. I hope that Donovan has also inspired. They train at WISA with Kiliakov and Elena Novak. They're a team that originally coached Green and Parsons. They also have coached Davis and Smolkin in the past, and they also coached McNaira and Spiridonov. I thought their rhythm dance was really fun, a little slow, but fun. Judges had a field day, however. Their free dance, they were skating to A Time to Die and Another Way to Die. It was clear from their costumes they were doing James Bond. And I'm like, okay, but they're not using writing on the wall. So I'm here for it. And of course, what comes on but writing on the wall at the end of their performance? And I'm like, of course, because it is a must. Apparently, if you're doing James Bond, you must use a writing on the wall. They looked really, really slow. I mean, their biggest issue for this team really is their speed, and it sort of affects them in the lifts, and some of their other sequences as well. But it was great that they were here. They do not have tech minimums to go to Worlds. They did have tech minimums here. So at times we'll talk about technical minimums. It's always good for me to explain sometimes what that means, especially since they changed the tech minimums from what they have been doing in the past. In the past, you needed to have a minimum technical score, meaning that you take the technical elements, drop the PCS, and that technical element score needs to be above a certain mark in order for you to be able to qualify for certain levels of championships. So in the past, you needed a certain minimum technical score for the rhythm dance and a certain minimum technical score for the free dance. Now they've combined it, I guess, in a way to make it easier. I feel like for some people, teams and singles alike, it's been more difficult this way, but it does, I guess, prevent people from having a super strong free skate all the time, but the short program always holds them back. It sort of gives them the opportunity to combine those scores, and hopefully one will lift up the other. But in order to compete at Four Consonants, you need an 85 as combined technical elements from your rhythm dance and your free dance, your best one at an ISU sanctioned event. And they had like just under 86, so barely enough for Four Continents, but you need 94 to qualify for Worlds, and they don't have enough to qualify for Worlds, which is why we didn't see the Indonesian team that we saw last week at Asian Games. They don't have the minimum technical score to compete at Four Continents. All right, so moving on to the Pam Chinko Award. I think the contenders have to be, of course, Piper and Paul, because they won here and got a big win over Maddie and Evan. I think, a lot of teams here had really great performances. I think you could also make an argument for Zhao and He, beating their Chinese teammates. But yeah, I think definitely give it to Piper and Paul for the rhythm dance. And that was really the difference between them winning here and finishing in second. So good job for them. So just to look at the Road to 26 trophy that happened this past week, this same week. It was a test event for the Olympic Winter Games at the venue in Milano, Italy. It was small roster, just 8 teams. Turkula and Versluis were the winners here and expected to be so when you looked at the roster. Green and Parsons weren't that far behind. Now, when Green and Parsons were at their best 2 seasons ago, they beat Turkula and Versluis at Worlds in a season that Turkula and Versluis won a bronze medal at Europeans. They did not have a similar experience at Worlds, however. So this is a team that Green and Parsons have beat in the past, but they're sort of working to get back to that old form. Now, you can't ever compare scores from events to events. But, look, this is basically a sports talk show. It's always fun to sort of do these things, right? So at this event, Caroline and Michael got 196 points. Carrera and Ponomarenko get 197 at Four Continents. So not too far apart, and we're seeing Caroline and Michael's scores increase over what we saw in the Grand Prix. Now, how is this going to translate to Worlds? Who knows? They could get a 114 and it wouldn't surprise me. But to me, they're very solidly kind of in that pack with the Tashlers and Reed and Amber Levicius and some of these other teams. They're not yet to Carrera and Ponomarenko, in my opinion, but like I mentioned in the Nationals episode, I do think that gap has kind of closed a little bit. All right. That completes the ice dance event at Four Continents. As always, let me know what were some of your favorite performances this weekend. I feel like we're getting all of our puzzle pieces there for Worlds. In fact, in terms of ice dance, next time I'll have ice dance coverage will be for a Worlds preview episode, probably a week or so before Worlds. I try not to do those too far in advance because you have people that end up withdrawing and something happens, and then my podcast becomes irrelevant, right? I think the first year I did this, I did like maybe like one a week so I could like really do a deep dive. But I think it'll probably be about a week before Worlds. So you can sort of expect it then. Also, look for Junior Worlds, which happens this week. I won't be covering it. I like to just be a spectator and a fan when it comes to juniors. But as always, as a good reminder, it is free on the web. Don't have to use a VPN for it. You can watch it. And there's junior ice dance is probably the most entertaining of all of the disciplines in juniors because they're entertaining pretty much from beginning to end. Whereas with the singles, you're going to get a lot of variance in terms of ability and quality of your programs. And the pairs can be a very interesting mixed bag as well. But junior ice dance, really, really fantastic. All right, you can find me on lots of forms of social media. So if you're not on one, perhaps you're on the other: Instagram, Threads, X, and Blue Sky at Ice Skate Podcast, easy to find. If you are listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe the video. If you're listening to your podcatcher, please also subscribe there so you can get all of that content into your podcatcher. You can also send me a line at thecuttingedgepod@gmail.com. I'll be back with the singles recaps in a couple of days. Until then, you guys have a great week.